The notion of all these things happening, with the superstars, you kind of get it.
Sure.
Right? Because but the truth is everybody's cheating, so it's kind of fair anyway because everybody's out there talking as much as they want to whoever they want.
Should we abolish all these sort of artificial thresholds and deadlines and just say go for it?
Yes, because they're doing it anyway.
Right. Clearly these conversations have been had already.
These back channel deals and conversations are going on. And I know the Commissioner, Adam, doesn't really like this, but if you think about it from the standpoint from the fans, they're eating it up right now because they're on Twitter and they're on Facebook and they're on all these social media sites and they're reading all this stuff and they're getting all these tidbits. And then the players, you know, their close people are tweeting out things and sending out things. So I personally don't like it. To me, if you're going to go through the free agent process and meet with teams and you line up teams, if you're the Clippers or some of these other teams that thought they was going to get a chance to sit down with Durant in a little bit, then you got to be heartbroken right now because you never really had a chance to give your pitch. And now it sounds like he's going to Brooklyn with Kyrie Irving. And again, it doesn't shock me that he's going because Brooklyn now, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like it's the new Manhattan of New York now. That's where everybody wants to go. And Kevin Garnett, my dear friend who played there, loved living in Brooklyn. He loved everything about it. And you're talking about a guy from a small town in South Carolina who lived in Minnesota that loved Brooklyn. And I think now the Knicks are in trouble because if Brooklyn becomes the new destination, then where do the Knicks go from now?
Right.
From here.
Well, that's a discussion I think we'll have a little later on. But Brooklyn is a cool part of the city. And I think from a player's perspective, they see what the team has built over the last few years in terms of culture and style of play and player development. But getting back to this notion of whether we should have these deadlines and whatnot, look, all the buzz is good for the league, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's before 6 p.m. Eastern time or after 6 p.m. Eastern time, the offseason has never held more intrigue than it does at this moment. But in terms of the way the operations go, is it important to have all these times that you supposedly can and can't do things?
You know what this is making me think right now is, and I'm going to go back to this because I mentioned this over the last couple of years. Do we have the order reversed? Should we have free agency first and the draft after free agency? Because if you know that you land a certain free agent and he fills this position of point guard, small forward, whatever it might be, when it comes draft time, might you not draft differently because you have a need somewhere else? So if you are 4th or 5th or 6th in the draft and you take best available player, all right, happens to be a small forward, well then do you stop going after a guy in free agency because you just drafted at number 4 a top small forward coming out of college?
Yeah, it's a good question. And because the first round contracts are all slotted, you know what that number is going to be.
Yeah, that's an age-old debate. My opinion on this is if it ain't broke, don't fix it because it seems to be working pretty well for the NBA. What are these rules?
Well, hold on. I can't agree with that. 82 games has been pretty good. Now I'm hearing we're going to 62 games. Come on.
Yeah, but
it ain't broke.
Well, what's broke?
Well, why are we going down to 62 games maybe?
Well, they're talking about it.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
but they're also talking about adding games in the middle of the season that would up that number a little bit.
So all our stats don't mean anything anymore. We just throw those out.
Well, that's part of the problem with it.
Here's my point. These rules are designed to create parity and excitement and give teams a chance. That's what the draft is all about. That's what a salary cap is all about. Mm-hmm. Can you guys remember a year where you've got the East and the West so wide open with everybody having a chance?
Yeah, right.
And some of that's because of circumstance and injury, but it's because of this velocity of movement of players. And whether it's the draft first or free agency first, it's working pretty good here.
It's a good point. And if Kawhi Leonard decides to go west, then who's the favorite in the East this upcoming season with Durant not playing for the Brooklyn Nets moving forward? In terms of, you've been around that Nets team a lot, in terms of their credibility within the city and the path they've been on, what does this moment mean for the Nets, even knowing Durant is not going to play next season?
It's an incredible moment for the franchise to have gone with them the way I did in broadcasting from the last few years in New Jersey into Brooklyn. And then when they do the deal they had hoped was going to bring them a championship with Boston, it wipes out draft picks for the next 3 or 4 years of no first-round picks. And then that fails. It doesn't work out. Thank goodness that the ownership change came about, and thank goodness that Sean Marks came along, and they made the right selection in taking Sean Marks. And then Sean Marks has seemed to make every right decision in putting a staff together, and they've added so many pieces to the organization. They've upgraded. They took a whole building and gutted it and made it their new practice facility in Brooklyn. They got, and this is the biggest thing, they got, I think it was 2 seasons ago, 12 out of 13 players to live in Brooklyn, which was an enormous commitment for the organization.
And then all that's appealing for those two guys because they hear about the culture.
Right.
You know all the staff members that were added there, these experts in every aspect of the field in terms of performance, in terms of training, in terms of off-field or off-court stuff. All that adds up, right, Sam?
Yeah.
To where the reputation of that entity is it's first class and it's on the move. And that's good enough for these two to pick up the phone, talk to each other and say, you with me? Yes, yes, let's announce it immediately.
Well, and beyond that, if you're at home or in a hotel room, if you're an NBA player or a guy sitting on the NBA TV set, you can just see with your own eyes the way they've developed as a team. Even when they weren't winning games, they were playing hard under Kenny Atkinson. They had a defined style of play, and you could see, hey, that might be a place I might want to go.
Well, think about it. If you can make the playoffs with the team that they had last year, with all the players. So they already have the ancillary players in place. They already got a good bench. They already got a good number 5, 6, and 7 guy. What were they lacking? 2 legit stars. And you got a guy at the point guard position, Kyrie Irving, speaks for himself, won a championship, one of the top players in the league. And then even though Durant's going to be out next year, you're having Kevin Durant. And some people, the argument between he, Kyrie, and LeBron as the best all-around player, period, in the NBA. And when you look at Durant, I put him in a little bit different category. He may be the best scorer. He reminds me of a George Gervin type guy. He is the best scorer that I've seen when you look at inside, outside, shooting the three, taking you off the dribble, making free throws. There is no weakness in his game offensively. And then once he got to Golden State under different coaches, then you saw the defense because I didn't know Kevin Durant could play defense when he was Oklahoma City. They used to kill him about his defense. And now all of a sudden, you look at what he did in Golden State. The best rim protector.
It's been their best shot blocker the last couple of years.
Yeah. So Durant has evolved into a great, great player on both ends of the floor. So with him, even though he's sitting out, think about it next year when Kevin Durant's going to come back and you're sitting there in your Brooklyn. Who's not going to want to go play with Kyrie, and in that city? And again, I go back to Kevin Garnett. He loved every aspect of living in Brooklyn. He loved it. And then my middle child lived in Brooklyn for a couple of years, and she loved it. So they're building something, and Tom, you said it, the culture of living in that area in Brooklyn with the team and with all the excitement, and then starting from top to bottom, the professionalism that they had, a #1 class organization, it's turned into a destination place.
Did your daughter come back a hipster? That's my
Absolutely. Yes, she did. Yes.
Hey, man, in the business world, don't they say that the best salesperson is the satisfied customer? So obviously, positive vibes were coming out of Brooklyn, and it's around the NBA players, all hearing about it, and it's becoming a place and they may want to go to.
You know, I've never had a real job, so I don't know for sure.
Okay.
If that's what they say in the business world, but that sounds right to me. It is 6 o'clock Eastern time. That means around the league, you can officially make the offers that have already been reported on in many cases, or officially meet with players, and that's still a big deal for a lot of the primo free agents out there, the Kawhi Leonards, the Jimmy Butlers, among others. Give me a sense of what is happening right now.
Well, right now, in the old days, it's midnight, and you're picking up the phone and you're calling your guy to officially express interest, even though you probably were talking to him for a while. Here, they're probably, at least in Brooklyn, they're arranging the chairs for the press conference for the deal that they're starting to talk about.
How about some of the other places? They're crying right now because think about all the preparation you put into, and Tom, you know this, when you're trying to sit down and meet with a free agent. There's a lot of prep going in because you're trying to learn all the little intricate details about that person to try to impress them. How did they know this about me? How did they know I like these things? So you've done all this research and all this prep work, and now all of a sudden, before you get a chance to meet with a guy, they announce that he's signing with another team. That's got to break your heart because you spent weeks and hours of preparation for what?
Well, you're describing the New York Knicks operation right now. Okay, so for them, they did all this, and they're probably like, wham, wham, uh-oh. For Los Angeles, the game is now on because both teams in Los Angeles have maximum cap room, and Kawhi is likely coming to Los Angeles, in my opinion, or he's sure going to still look at it. You still mentioned Jimmy Butler. Some of that still takes place. But you're right. In the old days, Sam, there was this whole pitch, and you'd do a parade, and you'd do the video tributes and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Now it happens so much more quickly.
It doesn't seem necessary, right? I mean, the guys know the teams for the most part. They have an idea how they're run. They have an idea of what style they like to play. Everybody knows everybody in the NBA, so invariably they can pick up the phone and call another player and say, hey, how did you like it this place?
And how long has it been going on for, Matt? Was it game 40? Was it game 50? Was it game 60?
Was it last summer?
Where they start talking about, I become a free agent this summer, just thinking about where I want to go. And then does this guy sell the program because of all the things they do, what they surround them with, the work that they put in? You don't think the coaching staff's important because those player development people spend so much time in the off season, before practice, after practice, on the off days, when they land in the next city, and trying to help these guys develop their game. And if you develop your game, by the way, you may get a new good contract.
Right. Adrian Wojnarowski clearly just had a whole bunch of tweets lined up for 6 o'clock Eastern time because he's just releasing all these contract details now. Let's go through some of them. Kemba Walker, as previously reported, 4 years, $141 million maximum deal with the Boston Celtics. J.J. Redick to the New Orleans Pelicans.
Wow.
Really interesting piece there with that team, which has changed a ton. They get some shooting in the Big Easy for David Griffin and Zion Williamson. Drew Holiday, everybody else there. Derrick Rose. This has been talked about for the last couple of days. A 2-year deal with the Detroit Pistons for $15 million. Played really well coming off the bench in Minnesota last season. No surprise, Chris Middleton is staying with Milwaukee. Max deal, 5 years, $178 million to remain with the Bucks after his first year as an All-Star in Milwaukee. Any of those surprise you? Any of those seem, particularly significant in your eyes?
Well, I like, nothing surprised me, but I like the J.J. Redick going to New Orleans because that tells me they're trying to win now.
Right.
When you look at what the team they're putting together, they're going to be young, but they're going to be talented, and they need some outside shooting. A bunch of teams do. So when you look at what they're trying to do in New Orleans, I keep telling people, they're not going to lose this year. They're trying to win, and I think if they can stay healthy, if they can get Lonzo Ball back healthy, being a defender and a distributor, Drew Holiday being that off guard who can score and also play some point, and all those
Brandon Ingram's help.
Absolutely, Brandon Ingram and all those pieces. I think you got to like what they quietly doing in New Orleans. And when you start adding a guy like J.J. Redick shooting, and then you look at Zion Williamson, I keep telling people, if he stays healthy, he's going to average between 10 and 12 free throws a game, and he will average over 22 points a game. Because in the NBA game, if he did that in college, where you can just load up on a guy and force him to shoot jumpers, and think about it, he didn't make threes in college.
Right.
And he still averaged 22 points a game on 13 shots. That's unheard of.
I love this for New Orleans because all the reasons you said. My brain jumped to Philadelphia because they're so vulnerable in Philadelphia. Jimmy Butler likely on the move. Now Redick leaves, and you got Tobias Harris still there, who they just traded for, and he's a free agent. So what's going to happen in Philadelphia here? I think it makes it maybe more likely Jimmy goes via sign and trade somewhere so they can get some assets back.
Well, if it's Miami or Houston, it has to be sign or trade.
That's right.
Yeah. Durant has made it official what has been reported this afternoon. He is going to the Brooklyn Nets. This via the Boardroom Instagram page. That is his Kevin Durant-owned company, the Boardroom, has confirmed he will sign a max deal with the Brooklyn Nets when the free agent moratorium period ends on July 6th, a few days from now. No surprise there based on what we've been hearing over the last couple of hours or so. Let me be the bad guy here and play devil's advocate on this Durant-Kyrie Irving pairing. Okay. Durant's not playing next season, right? Presumably you've got some sort of transitional period the season after that where maybe we're in sort of a Gordon Hayward, nebulous state where he's developing and coming back to his own self. Kyrie Irving signs up. Certainly wasn't entirely his fault, but a lot of people are pointing fingers at him for what happened in Boston last season, the dysfunction in that locker room. Is there an argument to be made that these were not the right moves for the Brooklyn Nets this season.
You could make that argument. I mean, that's a legit argument because you don't know what Durant's going to be when he comes back. I mean, Achilles injury is a devastating injury. It's tough to come back from. But because of his skill set, his length, and all those things, you feel like he can overcome it because his game is not predicated on jumping or quickness. Right. Durant can get to his spot and get a shot anytime he wants. But then when you look at Kyrie Irving, my concern with him is when he's healthy, tremendous player. Mm-hmm. But the best ability is availability. And Kyrie Irving, you got to ask yourself if you're Brooklyn now, how much, and you're waiting for Durant, how much do you put Kyrie Irving, how many minutes a game, Tom, do you play Kyrie Irving knowing that you're not going to win a championship next year because you don't have Durant? Do you burn him out in that first year, him playing 38, 39 minutes a game? Or do you say, look, Kyrie, load management, we're going to cut your minutes to 30 to 32 minutes a game because we want you healthy and fresh for that run when Durant joins you for those 3 years. Because if you burn him out in that first year trying to make the playoffs and do things that you know you really can't accomplish, you got to be realistic, put that realistic hat on. How much do you play Kyrie Irving? Because he's had some injury problems throughout the year.
Absolutely, and he may feel like he has something to prove given all this feedback we've heard coming out of Boston since the season ended there, and he may be looking at the Nets and D'Angelo Russell's numbers and thinking, if D'Angelo Russell can be an all-star in Brooklyn, I'm a better player. That's probably what Kyrie Irving is thinking, and maybe he's looking to put up numbers when it's sort of his show next season.
I would think that Sam hit it on the head. I kind of agree with Sam as far as they're going to look at this thing. Look, they tasted the playoffs. They got in there as, a 6th seed this year, so you hate taking a step backwards. But when you look at the East overall, can they be good enough to still make the playoffs and cut his minutes back? Because the last thing you want to do, and particularly with what wound up happening in Toronto when the word load management came out and they wound up winning the championship, and he says, if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have been able to play the way I played in the last couple rounds. That's making a statement for a lot of teams. Better listen up to what he's saying to you right now. So why, as you mentioned, would they burn this guy out when the best is yet to come the year after?
Wait a minute. First of all, the best ability is availability.
Absolutely.
I've never heard that.
I heard that line. I heard that on radio from somebody.
That is a great line.
But all this load management stuff makes sense unless it's the head coach, and you're charged with winning games. Yeah. So how does that, the coach part of you guys, how do you feel about that?
Tom, we've seen in the last 5 years, you don't have to win. You just got to be in tune and lockstep with management. And if management says, look, and again, I would not, if I'm the coach, you got to be realistic. I'm not going to burn Kyrie Irving out playing him 38 minutes a game when I know I got Durant coming next year, and that's when we're going to make our push. If Kyrie Irving is not the Kyrie Irving when Durant's get there, then I've signed him for nothing. So you got to be smart. You want Kyrie to play, but I'm not playing him 35, 36 minutes. I'm playing him 30 to 32 minutes a game, and I'm going to give him nights out because the coach said it. The best is yet to come when Durant comes back.
Well, Dinwiddie's there too now, right? They can use Dinwiddie to play those minutes to fill in. We got a nice guy who's having a couple of good years here.
Right.
Sit down and rest.
Develop some of these other young guys.
I still feel like you have to take a step forward if you've signed an A-list free agent in terms of wins and seeding, if not a playoff series win. Let's bring in the Hall of Famer Charles Barkley, who is coming to us from parts unknown. I don't know where you are, Chuck, but we're glad to have you with us. I know you're not on the Twitter, so maybe you didn't see all the reports over the last couple of hours that basically told us what we now know, that Kevin Durant is going to sign in Brooklyn with Kyrie Irving to completely change the face of that roster. What was your first reaction?
Well, I was surprised. I was very surprised that Kevin went to Brooklyn. Obviously, he's not going to play next year more than likely. But, you know, some of these teams, in my opinion, getting what they deserved. You know, all these teams put all their money. They stunk up the joint trying to get all this free agent cash, and they're not going to get anybody. Instead of doing their job like a Masai Ujiri, who drafted good players and things like that, actually did their job. Imagine that. Then try to poach other players, superstars. I think some of these teams are getting what they deserve. But, hey, KD going to Brooklyn, that's obviously a power ship. It weakens the Warriors. But like I heard you guys talking, it's going to be a year. What they going to do with Kyrie? Because you both had a great argument. They can't just relax and take it easy for a year. But I think that's why they bought in DeAndre. They got some good young players.
In terms of the move from the Warriors, where he won a couple of championships, he was Finals MVP a couple of times. He's got a bunch of business interests in the Bay Area. I hate to play psychologist here, but can you, from the perspective of a great player, kind of put yourself in his head and what might motivate Kevin Durant to leave what seemed like an ideal situation and go to an unproven one in Brooklyn across the country?
It had to be that he was unhappy with some circumstances around the team. I mean, it's that simple. I mean, 100%. He must not have been happy in that situation. You know, there's always been that tension, quote unquote, between him and Draymond. I think, like I say, I think he shouldn't have played in that game when he blew out his Achilles. I mean, that might, I don't know. I'm just obviously guessing, but clearly he was unhappy because it was a great situation he was in. So when guys leave a great situation, they must not be happy there, plain and simple.
And he left nearly $80 million in guaranteed money on the table by not taking that fifth year.
I hate when you guys keep saying that because that's absolutely not true.
Well, it is true. You're going to get some of that back in the fifth year, but
of course you're going to get it back.
It's not guaranteed, though. He's coming off a major injury.
Listen. All these guys, I hear these guys. Well, these guys leaving money on the table. No, they're not. They're going to sign another deal.
He'll probably sign another deal. I get your point there. I'm just saying, coming off a major injury, you're talking about guaranteed money.
Yeah, but like I say, he clearly wasn't happy there.
Yeah.
Listen, listen, how much money you think Kevin Durant gonna make in New York City?
Plenty.
He gonna make plenty of money.
A lot.
Hey, listen, don't forget he's making $30, $40 million from Nike. So let's don't act like when these guys leaving money on the table. You notice that the only guys who leave money on the table who got like a $200-300 million deal
yes.
with a shoe company or going to make more money in endorsements. So I always laugh when I hear these guys, well, he just sacrificed some money. No, he did. And let's be real.
Well, he did leave some on the table. I get your point. He's not going to be hurting. No one's saying that.
But when he signed his next deal, they'll make it up to him.
Yeah. In terms of basketball, 2 years from now, we don't know if Kawhi Leonard's going to be in the Eastern Conference at that point, but how good a team is Brooklyn on paper with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant in the context of the Eastern Conference?
Well, you can't even answer that question because you don't know what Boston's going to do. Danny getting Kemba Walker is a great pickup, but also you don't know what Philly is going to do with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid and whoever they sign. I don't think you can just pencil Brooklyn in as the favorite. I mean, think about it. Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons aren't going anywhere. So depending on what Elton does with trades and things like that, Philly could be the best team in the East. And you got to give Brad and Danny some credit. Getting Kemba Walker to me is an upgrade. One minute they didn't have a point guard. Now they got Kemba Walker, who's an all-star. But like I say, you're just guessing in 2 years what it's going to be. Like I say, and the main thing, we don't know how Kevin's going to come back.
Hey, Charles, it's Tom Penn. As a former superstar, how do you feel when you see these dollar amounts thrown out? When you see Damian Lillard at $258 million guaranteed over the 6 years, and I know you've gone through this evolution with players, but how does that react in your gut? How do you feel when you see these big numbers?
Tom, we listen. Number one, I'm happy for all the players to make as much as possible because these guys, they're talented, they're terrific, and the NBA, we generate gazillion dollars, TV and things like that. But I will tell you this: I was talking to Larry Bird the other night at the NBA's award show, and we were talking about. I'm so old, Tom. I remember the first time a guy made $1 million. We were going around the locker room high-fiving each other. Because remember when Magic first signed $1 million a year for 25 years? Me and Dr. J and Mose and all the guys were going around the locker room because we could not believe that an NBA player made $1 million. And now you see guys turning down $30 million to opt out. And I'm like, ooh, you turned down $30 million, and then you see they're going to get $40 million. It's amazing. Bless these young guys.
Chuck, Sam Mitchell here. I remember that because I almost lost my mind. Couldn't believe that Magic was going to make $1 million a year, like you said. But my question to you is, Kevin Durant, he can be a little sensitive at times, and the New York media is tough. How do you think he's going to handle dealing with the media in New York? Because now all of a sudden he goes from being one of 4 All-Stars to being one of 2, he and Kyrie. So, and you can arguably say that once he comes back, he's going to be the face of that Brooklyn franchise. How do you think he's going to handle the New York media?
Well, I think it's going to be difficult. I've already been on the record. I think him and Kyrie are both interesting in New York City because I don't know if either one of them mentally can handle the abuse. Because, like, clearly, I mean, because now we're looking at a 2 to 3 year plan. I mean, because, you know, obviously next year they're going to be all right. And then when Kevin come back, they're going to expect to win the championship. And, you know, that normally it takes them a year when guys have the Achilles injury to come back to being full trained. So now we're looking at 3 years. And, you know, those people in New York are not going to be patient. They're not going to be patient at all. So I think it's going to be difficult. I don't think it's going to be as easy as they make it out to be.
Hey, Chuck, it's Mike Fratello. First of all, I thought you and Shaq did a terrific job on the awards ceremony. That's the first thing. And the next thing is I want to go back to your thing about Magic signing that deal. Do you remember when I was coaching in Atlanta and we had a guy named John Koncak, and Detroit got a little mad at us because they thought that we made an offer on one of their players that, you know, we should have just laid low and not bid on him or get involved. So they turned around, and when his contract was up, they offered him $2 million a year for 4 years. And that was incredible that they would offer him that kind of money. We had to make a decision, match it or not. So we had to keep our center, we felt. So we matched the offer of $2 million a year for 4 years. And at that time, it caused an incredible frenzy around the league because there's a $2 million guy now.
Yeah, I remember that vividly. And when we were like, because, I mean, obviously that sent shockwaves around the NBA. But you know what? I think in retrospect, y'all probably wish you didn't match that contract. I mean, that obviously is hindsight, and everybody gets it right in hindsight. But I think that always kind of set the Hawks back in the long run. And I think this is where you see some of these guys, people are giving Michael Jordan a hard time because he's not re-signing Kemba Walker. And I said, I actually got no problem with that because Kemba Walker is a very good player, but I'm not giving a guy $200 million not to make the playoffs.
Kawhi Leonard, Chuck, is the next big domino to fall, and we don't know when that's going to happen. Unlike some of these other deals, including Kyrie Irving, which has now also been reported, Kawhi's situation seems like it's going to take a little longer. Toronto may make the most sense basketball-wise. You could make that argument. He's just coming off a championship. If he wants to go home to L.A., would you steer him toward the Lakers or the Clippers?
Well, listen, I'm not going to steer him anywhere. I hope he stays in Canada. I hope he doesn't go to the Lakers or the Clippers. That's just my personal opinion. I think what he did this year brought back a lot of faith in me as a basketball fan. Like guys not trying to stack teams, just being a great player, being a great leader, and leading your team to the championship. You know, when this whole super team started X amount of years ago, you know, I didn't think it was good for the league, and I still don't think it's good for the league. But to have a superstar who doesn't complain, just goes out to do his job, led his team to the championship with a bunch of good players, with a general manager who's probably not getting the credit he deserves, didn't have a top 14 pick on his roster. I think that was one of the great accomplishments in NBA history, and I hope he stays there because I think Masai Ujiri is going to always make them successful.
Talk about the opposite in terms of unsuccessful, Charles. What's your reaction on what all this means for the New York Knicks? Because it appears pretty obvious that the New York Knicks are the big loser of the day and could be the loser of the week in free agency. What are your thoughts?
Well, Tom, you see that I said that earlier. You got all these bad teams who, instead of trying to draft players and make their team better, they try to just make their team awful and create cap space and actually poach other people's stars. I think they're getting what they deserve. Like I say, I hate to beat a dead horse, but you look at the two teams in the finals. You take away KD, all those teams in the finals were built through the draft by good organizations. Yeah, KD went there and changed it, but if you look at the Warriors and the Raptors, they built their team through trades and draft picks. They didn't try to, let's get bad, let's clear cap space, and they'll steal somebody else's stars. So I'm glad these teams are getting their comeuppance. And like I say, I hope it happens to the Clippers also, too. I hope they don't get Kawhi. Because then you have this thing where, hey, let's just clear cap space, and when Giannis comes up or another superstar, let's try to steal somebody else's superstar instead of, like, you know what, how about you, general manager, actually doing your job and drafting good players?
Nice use of comeuppance, by the way, Chuck. And on our way out, before we let you go, best thing you've done this summer other than attend Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals? Well,
number one, shout out to you and your St. Louis Blues. Matt, I know you grew up there, and I was happy for your St. Louis Blues. I haven't done anything. I'm getting my game ready for Lake Tahoe. I want to peek in Lake Tahoe.
Uh-oh.
You know,
how's it looking?
Me and Tiger, we only gonna play periodically. So when we get to the majors, our game will peak. So I got about 2 weeks before I head to Lake Tahoe. So I'm just working on my game, and I'm gonna peak in Tahoe this year.
You're pacing yourself for Tahoe.
Yes, I don't want to have like a great round this week. You know, if I have a great round this week, it won't be relevant. So I got to pace myself and just keep working on my game.
I totally get that. That sounds like a solid strategy, Chuck.
Hey, listen, I'm a strategy guy.
I know you are.
Sounds like load management to me.
That's right.
Hey, I've been called a big load before, Mike, so I'm used to
that. Good to talk to you, Chuck. Appreciate you stopping by as always.
Great job tonight. I'm watching. It's going to be interesting because now what's the big thing now is Jimmy Butler.
Yep.
Tobias Harris. Obviously, Kawhi is the biggest dog left.
Yep.
But, you know, Jimmy, I just saw, watching, JJ went to the Pelicans. Shout out to David Griffin.
Absolutely.
Oh, man, what a great job he's done in the month he's been on the job.
Incredible turnaround.
I'm in Philly, and everybody's like, uh-oh, we lost J.J. Redick. Now, if they lose Tobias Harris and Jimmy Butler, this city is going to be on panic.
Yep. The process starts all over then.
Yes, it does.
All right, Charles, good to talk to you.
Okay, guys, thanks for having me.
All right,
the Hall of Famer Charles Barkley. Let's get back to the tweeting. Shams Charania, Kyrie Irving, as expected, 4 years for $142 million with the Brooklyn Nets. How about Trevor Ariza? Remember, he was traded during the season, $25 million with the Sacramento Kings for 2 years, according to
You're a
Shams.
veteran there.
Terry Rozier, obviously replaced by Kemba Walker in Boston. No spot for him there, but he's welcomed in Charlotte, so they effectively swap point guards here. $58 million over 3 years. You guys like this deal?
It's to Charles' point. Don't give all that money to Kemba Walker to not get in the playoffs. Let's see what Rozier can do for less.
I'm
Absolutely.
a Rozier fan.
Al-Farouq Aminu headed to Orlando on a 3-year, $29 million deal. The Chief now part of the Magic and a hole to fill there in Portland. Terrence Ross, a free agent as well. Some thought he might get traded at the deadline, but Orlando went for it. They made the postseason. He sticks with the Magic on a 4-year, $54 million deal.
I like that.
Very good off their bench last season.
The Magic are reloading on what worked for them to get them out of the cellar.
Vucevic returns.
Vucevic is back. Ross is back. What this does is it eliminates their ability for big cap room in the future, and then they go out and they make the addition via free agency. So at least they're following the mold. Chuck would be happy. Charles, you're happy with this because they're at least going forward.
Don't you think they're waiting on some of their young draft picks to come? And to Charles' point, as a GM, that's where you make your money in the draft. You know, and everybody think it's always got to be top 5, but to me, the great ones, the really good ones, find them diamonds in the rough. You know, they find guys after 15. You know, when you're drafting 1 through 5, pretty easy. Most people can pick a good player 1 through 5. When you get late in that draft in that second round and you can find guys that contribute to your basketball team on either end of the court, then you've done your job. And when you look at Orlando, they're comfortable with their players. They know what they got. And then they got some young guys who have yet to develop, because I keep telling people, when you draft these 19 years old, they're underweight. First of all, the thing that drives me crazy, you bring in a 19-year-old who played 32 games in college, and then you want him to do pre-practice workouts, practice for 2 hours, and then do after practice workout. And this guy, 6'8", 195 pounds. Those guys' bodies and their minds, they're not used to the NBA grind with the travel, the practices, and the workouts. So it normally takes those guys a year to 2 years for their bodies and minds to catch up with their talent. And so if you look at Orlando, they got some young guys who are underweight, who are thin. That
Jonathan Isaac.
Absolutely.
Mo Bamba.
Yeah. So what they're doing is they're saying, look, instead of going out spending this money on these other free agents, we got two young players with a lot of talent that we believe in, but they're still a year away, a year or two away. So we're going to continue to develop those guys. We're going to keep our core together. And if you look at Orlando, Scott Brooks used to say this all the time. They used to ask him at Oklahoma City all the time, well, are you going to add in new players? He said, yeah. Durant coming back, he